Comptroller Mendoza, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sufyan Sohel. I'm the Deputy Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations. We're a nonprofit, and our job is to protect the right of Muslim Americans living in our city and the greater Chicagoland area. But through that work and our advocacy efforts with all of our partners, we're also fighting against hate targeted against all of our communities, which we're seeing a rise of. You've been a 6-term state representative. You've been first woman city clerk. I'd like to give you just 2 minutes to introduce yourself to our audience, please.
Sure, well, thank you very much. I apologize for getting here a little bit past my starting hour, but I'm thrilled to be here. I appreciate you being here tonight. Interested in what's happening with the future of our city. I'm running for mayor of Chicago, and my name is Susana Mendoza, running for mayor of Chicago because the future of the city is at stake. And for me, this election is about much more than just the next 4 years. It's about the next generation, the type of city that we want to lead Chicago towards. I served 10 years of my life in the state legislature, which I think gives me a special set of skill sets that I know how to navigate the ins and outs of Springfield probably better than anyone else running for mayor, without a doubt, which I think is really important and critical, especially in today's age where we're getting very little to no resources from the federal government. Secondly, I've run the second largest office in the city, which is the city clerk's office. So I have that level of executive management experience, plus you've seen me in action over the last 2 years, standing up as the last line of defense against Bruce Rauner and his tyranny of our state, frankly. And most importantly, navigating the state of Illinois through the worst fiscal crisis in its history, and doing so in a way that did the next to impossible task of actually giving the markets calm during the most horrific time in our state's fiscal crisis. I am absolutely ready to step into the position of mayor and lead Chicago through future pending tough economic times. I don't shy away from a challenge. It actually is what motivates me to succeed even more. I'm also the mother of a 6-year-old son, proudly and happily married, but we are CPS parents and will be for the next 13 years of our son's life. He just started kindergarten in his local neighborhood CPS school, and I am fully vested in making sure that I work hard not just on behalf of my son, but obviously on behalf of every single parent in this city who would like to see our CPS system be one that every child, no matter where they live, will have access to a top-notch, top-tier school. So there's a lot that I want to talk about today, but I think that my time is just about to go beep. I saw my timer, so I'll be respectful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll come back to CPS. One thing that's alarming is for the last 3 years, we've seen a decline of population in the greater Chicagoland area. The Black community has declined every year since 2005, and CMAP just came out saying that we're losing a lot of low and middle class people, but we're seeing an increase in upper class. So with families considering moving to the suburbs or even to other states, how can we assure that residents from modest socioeconomic backgrounds can afford to live, work, and play in Chicago?
Well, great question. There's a few things here. I mean, the reality of it is that people leave for different reasons. And I can tell you my story, which many of you have seen a little bit on TV, is that my family left, and my family was poor. We were not a rich family. We didn't have privilege per se, but my mother was so horrified that she was going to show up from work one day and find her children dead, that there was a murder on our block, and my parents essentially overnight moved us out of our neighborhood, which is a neighborhood that we loved, Little Village in Chicago on the southwest side, to move us to a safe environment. And my parents borrowed money from friends. They worked multiple jobs just to put a roof over our head, but to give us a safe environment, which frankly made a huge difference in my life. And it was a motivating factor for me to come back to the city of Chicago, to the very same neighborhood that I didn't have a choice to leave as a kid, but it was my choice to come back and make a difference. Now today, our society and so many neighborhoods in Chicago feel as bad as it did for me back then, and worse. When we have communities where people and our children have easier access to an illegal gun than to a new book, this is a problem, and it's something that we have to tackle as the mayor of this city. Disinvestment in neighborhoods has been a critical reason why people are locked in a cycle of poverty with no hope that things are going to get better. I want to change that as mayor. And we have to recognize that we have unfortunately been impacted by a rigged and corrupt property tax system that has locked thousands of people in this city into a cycle of poverty. The next mayor is going to have to invest in neighborhoods in a way that we haven't seen in decades. And we have to, if we want to stem people leaving because of violence, attack the root causes of violence, which is a lack of investment in human capital. And we have to, of course, do things like better train and resource our police officers. But I really think that this is going to be about the next mayor being from neighborhoods, understanding neighborhoods, putting neighborhoods first, and rebuilding those neighborhoods in collaboration with the very successful downtown business district that we have today.
Thank you. Continuing on that line of thought, data shows that immigrants and refugees are more likely to open up businesses than non-immigrant residents and citizens. Does your neighborhood economic development plan include lightening regulation or reducing taxes for small business owners? And then the second part is, what is your plan to further support small business owners, particularly among immigrant populations?
Sure, that's a great question. Look, I would like to see, the fact of the matter is our immigrant community is all based on a super hard work ethic and a entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, it's what even brings immigrants to this country. You're willing to risk everything for a better opportunity. And the fact of the matter is that we need to do a better job of incentivizing and helping create small business growth in our community, certainly the immigrant community, which is everywhere in the city of Chicago. Now, we do have a very segregated city, which I don't think is a good thing, and we need to work towards creating greater opportunities and diversity of economic growth in every neighborhood. But even immigrants who don't live in those neighborhoods go ahead and invest in neighborhoods, some of which are the most underserved and under-resourced neighborhoods. So what we can do as a city to incentivize people, and immigrants in particular, who are part of that small economic or fast-growing economic engine of small entrepreneurs, to go into neighborhoods and help revitalize them and give them access to capital, which is the biggest barrier to entry for small businesses, is how do they access the capital to actually grow their business, to be able to start a business. Those are all things that I'd love to work with, and as controller, I have the pleasure of working with so many different non-for-profits and workforce development groups that want to partner with minority businesses. But here's another thing. I don't want to just see subcontractors sprouting all over the place from minority participation. We want to get to a point where our subcontractors are our next prime contractors and are really building the huge projects that are going to help reshape the city's future.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, we are seeing a huge rise in hate crimes targeting all of our communities, and immigrant, black and brown communities already have a huge fear of law enforcement. But solely based on their skin color, their place of birth, and their faith, communities are being targeted and criminalized by national security surveillance, such programs like countering violent extremism. But they're not only targeting groups like Muslim Americans, there are also other advocacy movements like Black Lives Matter are being targeted by those same surveillance groups. So what is your stance on CVE and the mistrust that it creates within our city?
Well, I mean, it clearly does. You have issues of, of privacy violations, and you want to look at these. There's the concept that you want to look at them as law enforcement tools, but I think they were sold to us on the guise of this is going to keep neighborhoods safer, and it clearly has been abused and used as a racial profiling tool. So that is never the place we want to be. And I think we have an obligation to call it out when it's happening and not support initiatives that are essentially, thank you so much. I'm sorry, I have asthma and this weather is terrible for it, but I'm okay. But essentially, we have to get to a point where we're balancing civil liberties with the need to keep neighborhoods safe, right? So absolutely this has to be reformed. Absolutely we have to call out racism where we see it. Absolutely we need to make sure that any databases that are out there, whether it's this one or gang databases, for example, which are being spoken about, are utilized fairly, responsibly, where people who are not supposed to be on them have an avenue to get off of them. And actually, like when you talk about things like, for example, a gang database, which is similar to this, right? The concept of it, which is supposed to be about safety. We have never even talked about how you could, if you did reform the gang database, utilize that as an early intervention tool with people who get put on it, to instead of just thinking about all the negative aspects of being in a gang, using it as an interdiction tool to say, here's an opportunity to actually reach out to some kids that we might be able to put additional resource into so that we can get them to start making good choices and not write them off as like a lost cause. So in terms of the racial profiling that is happening here, we need to call it out, and we need to reform systems and make sure that if they are not going to respect the civil liberties of people and are going to be used as a racial profiling tool, we either scrap them altogether if they don't want to work with us to make the system work correctly.
Thank you. We touched on it briefly. Right now, we're call ourselves an inclusive sanctuary city, but there are some exceptions. What would your administration, where would sanctuary city and that concept be under your administration, and how would that affect relationships with the communities with all government agencies? Sure.
Well, I mean, when it comes to sanctuary cities, this is just personal to me. I am the daughter of Mexican immigrants. I know what my parents did to get to this country, and I will always fight for immigrants and support a sanctuary city. And I look forward, actually, as the daughter of Mexican immigrants, because I think the two M's, right, M&Ms, Mexicans and Muslims, have been hit so hard by this racist, just misogynistic, every bad adjective you could use president that we have, who has specifically targeted Mexicans and Muslims as like the scourge of society, right? Do you imagine how much fun it would be for me as the daughter of Mexican immigrants to get to lead the third largest city in America, in Trump's America? Oh my gosh, it would just be, it would be awesome. But having said that, you know, the fact of the matter is that I, as the daughter of Mexican immigrants, will fight to make sure that we are protecting the rights of immigrants who are coming here to try to make a better life for themselves, and frankly, make a better city and make a better state of Illinois. Immigrants are a net positive to our country, and I'm going to fight to protect their rights. My only, I think, point of departure perhaps from other people when it comes to the sanctuary exceptions that, you know, people are talking about, is that I personally do think that if there is a warrant out for your arrest for a violent felony, I would want a U.S. American citizen to be able to be pulled over by the police and questioned on that, because it's a balance that we have to have of protecting people's rights and their freedoms, but also making sure that our streets are safe. So I think, you know, I don't think that that's an unfair or unreasonable request that, you know, if you as an American citizen had a felony out for violent, you know, arrest or something, I want to make sure that we're keeping people safe. And I think that's a reasonable request. But other than that, I feel that, you know, we need to make sure that we're protecting every aspect of our sanctuary city, and that Chicago will always, forever be, and certainly with me as mayor, an incredibly welcoming city that's not just welcomes immigrants, but will stand up and protect them as well.
Thank you. Our last question has three components. Significant numbers of Chicago public school students are from families of color and immigrant families. How will you increase support for neighborhood public schools? Do you support an indefinite moratorium on charter schools? And do you think it is best to have an elected board, an appointed board, or a hybrid of both?
Okay, good. Let's break it up into three. What was the first part? How am I going to support Chicago public schools?
Yes.
Okay, so as a mother, again, of a 6-year-old who just started the system and goes to a neighborhood public school. He doesn't go to a fancy school, just our local neighborhood public school. My husband and I have major skin in the game. Having said that, I'm very excited about my 50 New initiative, which I have rolled out on our website. It's part of our Future Now plan. And it would take, instead of talking about closing the next 50 schools, which you may have heard people talking about this stuff, I don't want to do any of that. I don't want to close schools. I'm going to double down on investing in 50 of the most underutilized, under-resourced schools in the city of Chicago, majority of which are in impoverished neighborhoods that feel hopeless today. And if we were to close those schools, all you're doing is cementing this belief that we've given up on those neighborhoods. I'm not going to give up on our neighborhoods. I'm not giving up on our kids. As controller, I've said I'm never going to default on debt service payments, and that Illinois remains a good investment. As mayor, I'm never going to default on our children. And Illinois children, Chicago children, will always be our best investment. So I'm going to provide additional resources to those underutilized schools. We're going to create wraparound services where we keep kids in school longer, getting access to mentoring opportunities, to after-school programs, and to supper. I passed a school breakfast bill. We can do that for supper in food and security issue areas. And also provide wraparound services like counseling, workforce development, life skills coaching, therapeutic services, trauma crisis, and job placement services, vocational trade training inside the vacant footprint of these underutilized schools, so that parents, not just the kids, but parents can access these critical services that would otherwise be overly burdensome for them to have access to within these underutilized schools, transforming them into true community anchors, which will be the beginning of the rebirth of those neighborhoods. I'm fully focused on that. We're gonna make it happen, and I don't wanna do it as window dressing. I want it to be a critical tool in helping me reduce the achievement gap, cut the achievement gap that today is just way too big in this city. White babies are not born any smarter than black or brown babies, but somewhere along the line, we have this morally corrupt achievement gap that we need to close. And every decision that I make as your mayor regarding education will be centered around the premise of, does this help me close the achievement gap in the city of Chicago?
We have 20 seconds, and I'd like you to answer the elected board, appointed board, or hybrid?
So I am for a hybrid elected school board, because I do believe, even if I was not the mayor of Chicago, but certainly as a mother in the system, that I don't want to give the mayor, whoever that mayor may be, I hope it's me, but still, there's no way that I would support a mayor walking away from responsibility of our kids' education and accountability that comes with that. So I absolutely believe in democracy. I think that it's imperative that we have additional voices at the table, teachers, administrators, parents, local school council participants, even the immigrant community, which, by the way, makes up a large percentage of the student population in Chicago public schools, yet under traditional fully elected school models don't have a vote or a voice on elected school boards. So I think that the more the merrier, but the mayor of the city of Chicago cannot just simply wash their hands and blame the success or failure of a public school system on somebody else. It's not who I am. I've never been that way. I will always take responsibility and accountability, and especially when it comes to the future of our children. So I hope that you can come on board that idea as well. But I am absolutely for more democracy, for opening it up, but I'm not going to give up my responsibility and accountability to Chicago public school children or their parents.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and please